He's not just a progressive. He is an avowed socialist. He's very proud of the fact that he's a socialist.
He makes no bones about it.
That's right. And
Yep.
I can't help but see that this is bad news in every conceivable way for Hillary Clinton.
Well, and I think that's why we've got people saying to John Kerry, are you thinking about maybe doing another presidential run? And people whispering in Joe Biden's ear, this is your year, Joe. Joe,
Yeah,
this is your year.
or Al Gore. I
Oh
mean,
yeah. Hmm.
and I can tell you that here's what I think. Honestly, I think if a moderate Democrat stepped up, that he might run away with it.
Well, and I think that's why Webb um, has a better chance than this year than he might have had in any other year when we might have had a more well known Democratic insider. Because Webb is a smart man and he's charismatic and he just seems to be a nice guy. Um,
The only problem with Webb that I see is that he just doesn't have the name recognition,
does
and I
Bill
don't.
Clinton mean anything to you?
Does Bill Clinton mean anything to me?
Did you know? I mean, you did because you lived in Arkansas, but the rest of the country didn't know who Bill Clinton was until he ran for
Oh,
president.
oh yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. He made all kinds of waves, and so he was much better known in my view than Webb is. But at any rate, um, I mean it's not worth getting worked up about it.
Oh no.
There's even more bad news uh, for Hillary Clinton. Only 1/3 of the voters say they're excited about her. And
Right.
51% of the voters say that although they would support her, they aren't enthusiastic. That's more than
That's just
half.
sad.
So
That
yeah, I'd
is just
support her,
sad.
but I'm
Mhm.
not enthusiastic about her. Folks, we need to think about that. Uh, Either one of these yahoos, if they got into office, we're going to see more insane laws. Uh, for instance, like the one that we're about to talk about, we're going to see more of that stupidness and more of the insanity that we've been seeing for the last 6.5 years.
That's
Uh,
right.
now, now speaking of stupidness, um, when this law was passed in Seattle, I immediately sent Lisa a message as soon as I found out about it. And I mean, the law wasn't more than a day old when I found out about it, and I fired it off to Lisa, and we talked about it. This is an interesting new law. Now, the Democratic Party is all about the money. Uh,
Yes,
they
they are.
they look for new ways to tax people every conceivable way that they can.
Hmm.
And here's a new tax. Tell us about it. What is it?
Well, uh, Alan West had this on his page, and he said Seattle just passed what we call a twofer. Two ways to harass gun owners while making no sense whatsoever, but hey, it's the liberal way. In the
Mm-hmm.
nonstop, never ending attempts to blame law abiding gun owners for everything from global warming to obesity to mad cow disease, the Seattle City Commission has decided it's time to punish them with a tax. According to the liberal lefty commandment, thou shalt tax everything that breathes, the city commission has decided gun owners must now pay for the hospital bills of gunshot victims. Instead of addressing the real problems of gun violence, the commission has decided a $25 tax on all firearms sales and a 5-cent tax on each bullet will reduce the crime rate and pay for all those expenses incurred by the city when rival gangs shoot each other up. Unlike some other really stupid liberal ideas, this one doesn't even sound good on paper.
Well,
As
what?
KOMO,
Let me wait. Let me ask you a question.
mhm,
Have we heard a response from the accountants of the gangs?
I don't believe they've written in.
Uh, do you think there are any accountants out there that work for the gangs? I mean, are taxes really an issue for gangs and gang members?
I haven't heard of that in all
I
of my
have.
research.
Do they buy their guns legally?
Generally, they don't. They aren't real good with records.
Okay, I'm sorry to to interrupt you. What did KOMO say?
KOMO said that the Seattle City Council unanimously approved a new tax on the sale of firearms and ammunition on Monday, a measure designed to help offset the financial toll of gun violence. But opponents quickly promised a legal challenge. The city adopted the tax, patterned after a similar measure in Cook County, Illinois, home of Chicago, on
Mm-hmm.
an 8-0 vote. Honestly, not one person has more common sense in Seattle on their city council.
Uh, they must all be
Okay,
Democrats.
you think? The tax amounts to $25 for each firearm sold in the city, plus 5 cents per round for nearly every type of ammunition. The revenue would then be used for gun safety research, and gun
Yeah,
violence prevention programs. Now let's just think about this for just a minute. Let's do that because consumers, honest, hardworking, legal gun owners, are not intelligent enough to simply drive across the city limit line to Kent, Washington, or Tacoma, Washington, or Spanaway, Washington, or any of the other nearby cities and legally purchase their guns and ammo without this usurious tax. And the gun shops that are within the city limits of Seattle will slowly wither and die. And whatever
that's
tax
right.
revenue the city of Washington or city of Seattle was reaping from them will be lost forever. That makes perfect fiscal sense. Honestly, Steve, the inmates are running the asylum, folks.
Well, that you're right. And when I was reading this, I thought, if the city that I live in Northwest Arkansas decided to pass this tax, it would have zero impact on me. To the south of me, seriously, less than a quarter of a mile is the city limits for the next town. To the west of me, about 4 miles are the city limits for the next town. To the north of me, about 12 miles are the city limits for the next town. There are gun shops and sporting goods stores and other, hunter supply stores in all of those other towns. So all I would do is just say, all right, fine, I'm not buying ammunition or any guns in my hometown. It's not going to affect me. In fact, the city limits to the south of me, there are several gun stores that are closer to me than any other gun store in my exact hometown.
Hmm.
So what the liberals think they're accomplishing, really all they're doing is probably putting the gun stores out of business in Seattle. And that, by the way, might be what they want to do.
It may well be.
But
It,
but
but
all
you know what?
they
I think about Gander Mountain, and I think about Cabela's and places like that that do a thriving business, and they're driving
yes,
places like that out of business. And shame on them.
absolutely.
Shame on them.
The other problem is once again the anti-gunners. The moment that some criminal or insane lunatic starts shooting up someplace, and by the way, 98% of the time, if not more than that, they shoot up places that are gun-free zones.
Absolutely.
So they go to places where legally no one's allowed to have a gun anyway. And then they shoot up the place. And every time that happens, they say, we've got to do something about this, and this will do it. This will, and I found this interesting. And you mentioned this a minute ago. When I originally read the article, it said that they were doing this because there were so many gunshot victims in Seattle, many of whom didn't have any way to pay for their care. And so
Hmm.
the taxpayer ended up having to pay about $12 million last year in Seattle for gunshot wounds. But when you read further down in here, it says the revenue would be used for gun safety research and gun
Yes.
violence prevention programs. So it's not going for what they said it was going for in the first place.
And but does that surprise you? We're talking about Democrats.
Well, we're talking about liberals, and so whenever they institute a tax, you almost always need to look carefully and see if it's really going for what they say it's going for.
That's
Now,
right.
our next story We've talked about this gentleman a time or two here lately. He just wrote a book about the Iran deal, and
Right.
actually, he wrote the book pointing out the negative aspects of it. He is a Democrat. He has been to the White House. He has voted for Obama twice. He is a
Mm-hmm.
liberal. Um, and who am I talking about?
Alan Dershowitz.
That's right. That's right. And he had something to say this week about his
Yes.
his friend Barack Obama. What did he say?
Well, he said he's an abject failure based on Obama's own judgment of uh, his own standards.
Mm-hmm.
Based on Obama's own standards, he was interviewed by the Solomon Center for American Jewish Thought, and it was a contentious interview. But Dershowitz was exceptionally critical of the president's handling of the Iranian nuclear deal. Of course, we've talked about his ebook that he wrote titled "The Case Against the Iran Deal: How Can We Now Stop Iran from Getting Nukes?" But he said, if you judge President Obama by his own standards, he is an abject failure when it comes to international relations. Forget about my standards or yours. By his own standards, he is an abject failure when it comes to dealing with Iran. His fundamental critique of the Iran agreement is that it reveals a major shift in Obama's objectives between when he campaigned for a second term and his stated objectives now. While running
Mm-hmm.
for re-election, Obama said he would do everything possible to eliminate the threat of Iran obtaining nuclear weapons capability. Now he has essentially taken the military option out of the equation, a major blunder in international relations, even in terms of diplomacy, and backing off of the threat to physically destroy Iran's nuclear capability eliminated the president's ability to negotiate from a position of strength. Dershowitz said that was an extraordinarily naive and wrong thing to do because that allowed the Iranians to negotiate with us as equals. And I'm not the only one who has said this. He said, many liberal Democrats I've spoken to believe we made a tragic negotiating mistake, that what we should have done was said to the Iranians, look, you are never, ever going to be able to develop nuclear weapons. That's American policy, and we'll stop you whatever it takes. The result has been that we were on equal footing with Iran, and that means the president lost. Now the problem is that we negotiated as equals and we were playing checkers against the people who invented chess, and they checkmated
Mm-hmm.
our president and our Secretary of State. The end result is that now we are going to be equals because they are going to have nuclear weapons, and once they have nuclear weapons, they are essentially equals. We can't take them on. We have no viable military threat against them, so it was a double disaster.
Well, the more we learn about the Iran treaty, the less we like it. And that
Right.
seems to be a universal theme these days. In fact, we've got about 2 minutes before we need to take a break. So we're going to have to go fast on this. But
Right.
give us a synopsis of the Iran deal and its legality according to two senators.
Two senators, Tom Cotton and another colleague of his, went to Europe, and they were sitting in a meeting, and they found that there was a some side deals that were created uh, for the Iran treaty, and that were secret. And the Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act specifically provides that Congress must receive, quote, all nuclear agreement documents, including any related to agreements entered into or made between Iran and any other parties. It expressly includes side agreements. This requirement is not strictly limited to agreements to which the U.S. is a signatory, Senator Cotton and Representative Mike Pompeo wrote in a joint op-ed in the Wall Street Journal last week. Cotton and Pompeo recount that they traveled to Vienna a few weeks ago to meet with officials of the UN International Atomic Energy Association or Agency, the IAEA, and there they learned that certain elements of this deal are and will remain secret. They further discovered that those involved with the talks, including the Obama administration, specially allowed the IAEA and Iran to have two side deals. So they sent a letter to the Obama administration, requesting access to all relevant information so the agreement can be adequately reviewed. And it appears that at this point, the deal is already illegal because the Iran Nuclear Agreement Review